What is a disturbing fact about the United States? The Tuskegee syphilis experiment. In the 30s, Tuskegee University found hundreds of black men in Alabama who tested positive for syphilis, didn't tell them they had the disease, and offered them food and medical care in exchange for them to participate in an experiment that would last 6 months. But the researchers carried it on for 40 years without telling the participants and without continuing to treat them. Child marriage is legal in most states, and in almost half of the states. If you keep a child conceived from rape, your rapist will have parental rights. My 13-year-old cousin had a baby from rape and the dude had to sign over his rights in order for the child to be adopted once she lost custody. There was a riot in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921 that destroyed basically the entirety of what was, at the time, the wealthiest African American community in the U.S. Somewhere between 100 to 300 people died, and something like 10,000 African Americans were left homeless. It was and still is the largest and most destructive race riot in U.S. history, and most people have either never heard of it, or barely know of its existence, since it wasn't put into many history books. Tulsa itself didn't even formally acknowledge that it happened until 1996. U.S. has in the past performed illegal, unethical scientific experiments on citizens, and most of the subjects were never informed or compensated and no one ever was held accountable. There were at least 3 congressional hearings that led nowhere: Church Committee, the Rockefeller Commission and the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments. In the not-too-distant past, the government introduced something into a city's water supply to test the spread of a biological agent in the surrounding community. If they've done it before, not informed subjects, broke laws and covered it up. How does anyone know it isn't happening now? In the 1940s we put Nazi scientists on trial for basically the same things the US was doing. We were trying them at the same time the government and Harvard were doing experiments without consent or informing them, on pregnant women in Chicago by injecting them with synthetic estrogen, causing a rise in miscarriages and low birth weight. 1960s they experimented on children, once again without consent, a drug for acne, and continued the testing for some time, although early on the subjects had a very high rate of liver failure. Even past 2000 there have been questionable experiments on people who didn't want to participate. One being a patient who was given the choice between participating in the program or being involuntarily committed. His mother objected to the experiment. His doctor had financial ties to the drug company. During an investigation all were cleared. They used to poison alcoholic drinks. When the chemists' war on prohibition began, the government realized making alcohol consumption illegal was only increasing its sales. Their solution? Seize and poison any and all liquor, then re-release it to the public. There is an entire industry dedicated to imprisoning the elderly, sucking away all their funds, liquidating their assets and then killing them when they are no longer profitable. It's called guardianship, and it's perfectly fucking legal. Its politicians and news outlets keep telling the citizens that sides are more divided now than ever and we need to put aside petty differences and come together when the exact opposite is happening. 40 years ago Black Panthers were openly carrying firearms to counteract police brutality. 50 years ago college students threw bombs at government buildings to protest an illegal war the US declared on Vietnam. Meanwhile Occupy Wall Street came and went without any effect because the organizers were more concerned with civility and legality than doing something that could harm Wall Street. We are in an era of complacency and indifference. The US government will continue to violate the rights of American citizens, especially those in minority communities, and will never face justice for their actions. If you haven't heard of the ways the government has fucked over its own people, I encourage you to look into MKUltra, Operation Northwoods, the Patriot Act, Guantanamo Bay, the NSA, etc. Remember that the main divide in our society isn't left versus right, it's top versus bottom. Your national narrative and identity talks a great deal about freedom and equality. But your society experiences many of the same problems that plague other countries. That's not the disturbing part either. The disturbing element is some Americans drank so much of the Murica Kool-Aid that they honestly think they're the best people living in the best country on earth. How do you start fixing real problems when you have citizens and politicians running around pretending nothing's wrong? One that I don't hear a lot about is COINTELPRO. One of the things the US government did in this program was ship MLK a gun and tell him that he should kill himself. They did some other messed up stuff, but that's what sticks out to me from memory. The oppression of black people, how the country has made it okay for black people to just be killed off with no real consequences. The number of black men being locked up is alarming. Some of them are way too young for petty crimes and some are just innocent, but they were just looking for someone to blame and he fit the profile. School shootings are pretty scary too. Someone who was born and raised overseas can still vote in some elections. If a person was born and raised in the UK, never been to America, but their father was from New York, that person can vote in New York elections, including the president. If a person was born and raised in the UK, never been to America, but their father was from New Jersey, that person cannot vote in New Jersey elections or vote for the president. In both cases, the person would be considered a natural-born citizen, but their voting rights change from state to state. The whole slavery thing is unsettling and the foundation of America for centuries. The people here now who worked for free never got compensated for it and it won't go away.